For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and I'm here with co-writer, and director of the movie Gracie, Mr. Eric A. Poe. We are live here at Atoma Con and the Atoma Con Film Festival. So tell us a little bit about this movie, Gracie.
So Gracie is, I call it a horror film. It's really more kind of a horror, psychological horror, a slight thriller. But it's a film about a man named Vincent who has a sister named Gracie, and she has a problem killing people. So it's a little bit crazy, and he has to deal with that.
It has this American Psycho edge to it that here you have a guy that's essentially very calm and collected on the surface with this kind of underlining sadistic secret, if you will. Can you kind of talk about some influences that inspired the film?
So I think when I had kind of started from having seen a picture. It was actually a print from like a girl's room, like something you would put in a girl's room. And I was like, it's supposed to be kind of cute, but it looked a little bit like it could be sinister. It could be a little creepy. So I kind of developed it out of that, and I wasn't looking at necessarily any films. After I wrote it, I was like, oh, it does have some similarities to some horror films, kind of American Psycho type thing, Psycho, and things like that. So it wasn't necessarily from any specific thing that I was looking at when I wrote this play. It kind of flowed from my psyche a little bit, I suppose.
So obviously you don't want to talk about the twist of Gracie, who we kind of find in the film's third act, but obviously having someone that can kind of have the complexity of Gracie take some challenges when you're casting. Can you talk about some of how the casting process worked?
So as we were writing it, I had written the script. I sent it to my co-producer, co-writer, Dan Beck, and I had written it, and then we sat down and we kind of tweaked it together. I mean, over the course of a number of months. And while we were doing that, we were talking about casting. And we weren't sure who all we might want to cast. Mostly it was cast from within local Augusta.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Cooper, we had hit on as playing the Vincent character. Tommy's a good friend. He's a good actor. He does a lot of stage production in Augusta, and he was a theater major in college, so that's what we used for that. But we also wanted Aaron Brown, Aaron Brown has a fairly long, involved acting career from the time she was very young. I mean, teens. So we were like, we could get her, and maybe we could get her to play Gracie, which we thought was, we thought it could have been like a bigger part, like it would be too big. Like, how long do we have to have her in order to film that part? So it really wasn't too long. We got her in. We had her there for 4 days. We filmed all of the scenes, quite a few scenes that had her in it. But she was kind of our main actress. So you can look up Aaron Brown, and you can kind of see credits that she's had through the years, including Sick Girl, which was an episode of Masters of Horror. Yeah, and she did a great job in that. She was in it with Angela Bettis. So that was kind of, she went from being like a very, very low budget kind of starlet to being someone who can actually carry films and kind of bring a lot to the part, and she did. So yeah, I think between the two of them playing the Vincent and Gracie characters, that really kind of helped make the movie, in my opinion.
This movie has so many different characters, but also that are like distinctive personalities and points that you have. As a writer, especially when you talk about having a co-writer later on in the process of the creation, but as a writer, for you, what is it like to kind of challenge? What are some of the challenges of handling so many different characters, but also finding ways to keep them distinct, but also develop them as the film goes on?
Well, certainly, you have to have characters that kind of like push your main characters as well. So I knew what the relationship between Vincent and Gracie. And so I needed people to kind of push them to do certain things and kind of, be certain ways within the film. What I found out and I discovered after I kind of had written these, and I'd written the script and I was reading it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like all my childhood traumas. So like all these characters, they're all adults, but a lot of them act like children. I mean, Gracie particularly acts like a little child sometimes, and then I have the character of Jack, who's kind of the bully, and I mean, he acts like a bully, and he acts like a middle school bully, you know. And there are other characters who are kind of the tattletale characters. So I mean, these characters who are doing, and they were very much caricatures, really. I would say archetypes of those characters. And in my mind, I'm like, it's okay. I wasn't necessarily trying to flesh them out as like realistic human beings, but they're characters, they're archetypes of these types of characters. And it was just kind of, it came out of my psyche, you know, as I was writing them. So.
Do you feel like kind of creating characters in that fashion kind of gives Gracie an unexpected, like almost satirical vibe edge to it?
Absolutely. When I was writing it, and I was like, you know, all of these characters are for the most part over the top characters. So I wasn't trying to pretend that they were anything other than over the top characters. There are some subtleties within characters, and there are some very human characters in there that are not childish archetypes. I think, you know, the Vincent character in particular has a lot of issues that he's working through, and Meredith, who's like the love interest in there, also very human, very, you know, going through a lot of different kind of not as many emotional ranges as the Vincent character, but so yeah, I mean, there are some real characters in there as well that I kind of developed that way, but the surrounding characters, the supporting characters are very over the top, and they're not always realistic characters.
One of the things that really surprised me about this is kind of how it takes the familiar trope of kind of office romance and kind of infuses it into the story, but also kind of has this twist with it that is really refreshing. What were some of the challenges in creating something that most people would find familiar, but also kind of allowing it to not only feed into the film's main twist, but also kind of flip that trope on its head?
Yeah, as I was developing the story, initially it grew from a Vincent and Gracie relationship, and initially I was like, this is what they look like at home, how they react to each other and deal with each other, and I was like, okay, so the Vincent character, I mean, he's going through something here, having to deal with this sister who's a little bit psychotic. Where can I show him outside of that to show him trying to be more normal, you know, and lead this normal lifestyle? Because his life at home is not always a normal or easy life. Sure. So I'm like, let me put him in an office situation. Let me develop a relationship thing. How does he act when he's trying to be normal and trying to fit into society instead of, you know, just being at home with his crazy sister? And, you know, it doesn't always work out for him, as you can see. So it kind of allowed me, an office situation allowed me to create other characters. The Meredith character was the love interest, Jack, who is the kind of bully jerk, his kind of antagonist. And then some other characters also, Chase and some of these other characters who are supporting characters. So, yeah, I mean, it just gave me a palette to kind of work with different tropes and things like that. And it just fit in well with the storyline because the way the different office relationships work together and are kind of resolved at the end of the movie. So, yeah, it just allowed me to kind of explore different types of characters that way. So it was good for me, I suppose.
So in the movie, the Gracie has kind of what we'll call a self-portrait that is printed, is made in her younger years. I'm kind of curious, in the creation of the film, was that something that already existed, or was that something that you guys kind of envisioned for the movie?
It was the print idea was what inspired the movie to begin with.
Okay.
So it wasn't that print. It's not the print you see in the movie. I found a print at a thrift store when I was buying some things for another movie I was working on, a short film. And I saw it and I'm like, okay. So like I said, I saw this and it was a print for a girl's room and it's supposed to be cute, like a girl with some butterflies and things around it. And I was like, but it feels like there could be a sinister vibe underneath this portrait. So I bought it and I kept it, and eventually I got back to it and developed the story from that. The print that's in the film, my co-writer, co-producer, Dan Beck, his wife is an artist, and so she made that particular print. That was a painting that she did. It wasn't a print. She painted it, and she actually did two exactly the same. So we had, just in case one got damaged while we were filming, and we had another one. So, but that's where that came from, and it was actually the inspiration for the whole film.
That's awesome. And it also kind of speaks volumes into the type of things that art can have an impact, whether that's inspiration or is something that we value for our mental health. One of the things that I'm very curious about with the Gracie character in particular is there is so much complexity from even a mental health perspective. And what was kind of the research like for you guys, and kind of how creating a character that didn't feel like a stereotype but felt authentic and true to people that may struggle with some of the things that Gracie does?
Yeah, I think it was mostly, I didn't necessarily go out and do a lot of research on that type of character. I just went from what I felt and what I had seen before. And, you know, I had seen in some other films, and, you know, we see things on television and things all the time. And I just developed that character from that. So it wasn't, I didn't do a ton of research. It just came from in here. Like I said, a lot of things were kind of from things that I've experienced in my lifetime, you know. And like I said, kind of a lot of childhood traumas, but also things like that. You know, I'm just looking at it going, okay, let me explore like how she would act, you know, because she's very childish. So how would a child act in this situation? What would they do? What would they say? And then once I had kind of written it and I handed it over to Erin Brown, of course she brought that character to life very much, maybe even more so than I was thinking in my head. So yeah, it was not necessarily a lot of research. It was a lot of.
When you kind of talk about the personal experience that you kind of contributed to it, almost how it sounds like kind of creating this kind of was a form of therapy for you. What I'm curious about too is I think that one of the things that this film gets accurate from a mental health perspective is often how, if left untreated, with certain traits that we develop kind of young into childhood, can kind of definitely have an impact on how we see the world, how we interact with people throughout the course of this. And I think you guys nail it right on the head with it. I love the portrayal of kind of this cautionary tale. Kind of looking at it from like your own personal perspective, we here at Victims and Villains, we really value how art can be a form of therapy, it can be a form of expression. For you, can you kind of talk about how creating this character and kind of, I don't want to say necessarily exercising those demons was for you, but can you kind of speak on it?
Yeah. I mean, I can a little bit. I think I will say right off the bat, like when you kind of get later on, you get a little bit of the history of Vincent and how some of these things, and Gracie, and how some of these things came to be. I didn't necessarily grow up in a household like Vincent grew up in. So, you know, I didn't grow up in a broken household. My parents were good and all that. So it wasn't all of these types of things, but I understood and have known a lot of people who grew up in households like that. And I think that could have an impact that follows you through the rest of your life. And I do think that was what I was thinking when I'm writing all of this, and kind of mostly it was all these things that we experience as we're growing up affect us at the end of our life, and how do we deal with it, and how can we strive to, try to find some normalcy, or do we just completely fall into these patterns and traumas and things
Yeah.
that we have?
I think one of the things that is on the flip side of that, Vincent, the complexity of him is kind of, one of the things that I think we forget about in childhood is that the type of things that might be normal, but we consider normal because it's all we know.
Yeah.
Sometimes those can be really bad in terms of, just things that the law doesn't necessarily shine on, which we kind of see here with Gracie character. But there is this kind of morale complexity or dilemma, if you will, to the Vincent character of, I love my sister, but I know these are bad things that she does.
Yeah.
But can you kind of, from that perspective, you kind of talk about Gracie kind of being this channel for childhood trauma. Does it feel like Vincent is really the kind of the opposite of that, to where it's kind of this like morale of journey going through with the characters?
I do think that's true. I think that Vincent, because Gracie is like, it's almost like if you take segments of the brain, and there's this childhood, almost a little bit bratty, but probably more than that with Gracie, that she's the child and Vincent's the adult, and he has to deal with this outcome all the time. So every day, so he has to deal with it in his personal life, at work, and he's trying to latch on to these things that are normal or that he sees as normal. But it's still difficult for him because he has to deal with this all the time. This is an ongoing issue for him. So I do see him more as this adult that's grown out of a traumatic childhood, and he's still having to deal with these things that his sister is doing that are still part of that traumatic childhood. So that's really that, kind of give and take. They're always fighting against each other, these aspects of personality.
Yep.
And I think it's true. I mean, I know that Gracie in the story is a very extreme version, but it's things that we all go through. Even if we have a good childhood, there's still things that we all experience that are traumatic, and that we're still kind of fighting against all the time, that affect the way we behave now as adults. So,
no, absolutely, and I think you really kind of hit the nail on it. Who we are today shapes who we are going to be tomorrow. So, Eric, thank you for your time. The film is called Gracie. Where can people find you online and kind of follow the screening journey?
Okay. Well, at the moment, it's not online. So we still have, we got it into some film festivals. There's still some tweaking on the movie itself. And then there's a lot of little steps that we have to do before we can get it online. But I do hope to get it on a streaming service at some point in the near future. We do have someone lined up to do some physical media, so particularly some Blu-rays, if someone wanted to order those at some point. We don't have that set up yet, so I can't really give you anywhere that you can get the film. You can look for it at some festivals. Hopefully we've got some more festivals coming up. We'll see what works out with that.
Well, thank you guys. Make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button below and support independent film, and check out our mental health resource library.